Did you know that more than 800 pieces of public art have been placed on county-owned property, enhancing parks, recreation centers, libraries, government buildings, and public spaces? And what about the public art that private developers contribute? Let's learn how the art gets there.
So the Public Art Trust is essentially a steering committee made up of representatives from a bunch of different public agencies. Susan Jenkins is the CEO of Arts and Humanities, which heads up the Public Arts Trust. So we all work together and we manage the publicly owned public art pieces for the county as a whole.
The Public Art Trust is a wonderful opportunity for creative placemaking. What do I mean by that? I mean, when you look at public spaces and you think of how beautiful they can be with natural surroundings, organic surroundings, like what we see today, and you insert a beautiful piece of public art, something that can appeal to the community, something that inspires conversation, something that brings disparate groups together. The Public Art Trust does that. We get an appropriation from the county, and that appropriation is used to invest in public art in Montgomery County. The county has been collecting public art for many, many, many years, and the Public Art Trust is the designated agency that deals with both the appropriation, the conservation, the maintenance, and the purchase of public art in Montgomery County. The Arts and Humanities Council is the designated local arts agency for Montgomery County. So if you're familiar at all with the National Endowment for the Arts that gets federal funds for the arts, the Arts and Humanities Council is the local agency that gets funds from the arts. We subsidize about 450 organizations and about 1,500 individual artists, and we manage the Public Art Trust.
I'm the Department of Parks representative on the Public Arts Trust Steering Committee, and what that committee does is we bring our capital projects forward and nominate projects where we might like to see public art. So it's reviewed by the whole Public Arts Trust and the other members of county agencies who are on the steering committee. And we, if our project's approved, we put money in our budget for it. Then we work through the Public Arts Trust, who manages the commissioning of the artist, select the artist, and then work with them through the design and the fabrication and installation.
Publicly owned pieces, there are about 300 in the field, and then there's 500 works on paper. And then on the private side, there are about 100 pieces or so in private development.
Private developers can also provide public art. It's an option under the Montgomery County Development Review process in downtown areas and transit area zones, an amenity in exchange for increased density. The Art Review Panel guides the process.
It's about 7 different panelists, including myself, which I coordinate their schedules. And we basically review private development, and we make sure that whatever the public package is, right now, with the current zoning ordinance, it's public use space. It actually benefits, is an equal exchange between public amenities, public facilities, and the density that they're getting for the project. They're just discussing for just privately owned. So Arts and Humanities would then make the final decision about what gets commissioned for the county publicly owned.
A few that I think are popular, they're located in public spaces where people like to gather. A couple that come to mind are Made in the Shade up at Lake Needwood Visitor Center. That's by Anne LaRose, and it's a cast bronze bear who's leaning back with his sunglasses on, and he's really cute. And then another one that comes to mind is Whispers by Stephen Weitzman, which is a cast stone sculpture of 2 children, and it's located in Sligo Dennis Park, right next to a playground and a community building that are well used. So on a nice day, you'll often see people sitting on the benches around it, or sometimes even kids sitting on the sculpture. Our newest piece in the parks is The Faces of Darnestown by Cheryl Foster, and that's in Darnestown Heritage Park. And that's a series of figures that are cast fiberglass that emerge out of the stonework in the park. And they're meant to represent faces in the town's history. So there's a representation of William Darn, who was the founder of Darnestown. There's an Indian chief, a tobacco picker, a school marm, and a mail carrier, and they're really quite wonderful. We have 2 new parks coming online, one at Evans Parkway Neighborhood Park, and so we have artists Ali Delabita and Drew Gorlitz, who have designed a series of granite markers that have images of the plants and animals you might find in the park. And then the second project we have coming online is the Germantown Town Center Urban Park, where artist David Hess is designing some of the architectural features of the park.
A trio of sculptures called Takoma Trees is a recent installation. Here's the artist to explain the process.
I'm Judy Sutton Moore, and I'm a public artist. I do 3-dimensional, large-scale sculptures, and the one behind me that you're seeing is the Takoma Park trees that were commissioned for the Takoma Park in Takoma Park, Maryland. These trees are stainless steel. Each tree is 22 feet high, 10 feet wide, and 8 feet deep. And they have hand-cut prisms when each of the branches of the tree. There were landscape architects that worked with this, and they knew they wanted some kind of entrance sculpture. In the early process, I was working with them, and I specifically designed these as gateway pieces. And the choice of trees was purposeful. Takoma Park is very, very proud of their trees, and they take good care of their trees. And of course, this park is totally surrounded by trees, so the theme of trees seemed to be what was perfect. I wanted to use the prisms in the trees so we could catch the light. This is the model that I made of the Takoma Park trees. The process is basically the same. It's always a competition. And whoever is wanting a public art puts out what we call an RFQ, a request for qualifications, and artists read what the prospectus is, and if they're interested, they put in their qualifications. Then the group goes over it. They usually pick out anywhere from 2 to 5 what they call semi-finalists, and they ask those people to prepare a proposal. In other words, what would you do at this public art site? And then you prepare the proposals, and then they look at them and they choose one. It's very hard for someone to visualize something 22 feet high. I remember the first piece of sculpture I made that was 22 feet high. I walked into Handy Dan, which is like a Home Depot place in Texas, and I was looking at this ladder, and my head started going up, and it started going up, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's really tall. I work with an art fabricator. All they do is build art. Also, when you do things like this, it always goes through a structural engineer. I want to be sure that this is going to stay up through hurricanes and snow and wind and stuff. And we follow both the engineer's drawings and my drawings, and we fabricate this, meaning the metal is cut, shaped, welded, and then polished. Pieces like this require cranes for installation, and the challenge is always being able to get the piece off the truck. There were 3 of these trees, 22 feet long, and we had to bring them from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which means you have to get police escorts and all this kind of stuff. This one was particularly challenging because of the cable lines that went across our access to the site. So the crane got the piece off the truck, put it on the ground. The crane drove up with the crane down. It could drive up to the site. Then we got a huge front loader from a construction site that was here that lifted the trees and got them under the wires, but all of this has to be planned out ahead of time. You've got to think of these things, but part of that is what I like about public art. There's challenges at each stage, and I love the challenges. I love the challenge of the design. I love working with the parks people and the designers. I mean, that's just terrific fun. Ultimately, what's important to me is I walk away from this. This doesn't belong to me. I just helped put it here. It belongs to the community. And when we were installing it, and we had, I think, one tree up and the other tree was standing there, it hadn't been attached, the elementary school let out and everybody was walking by and they started clapping and cheering, and it just brought tears to my eyes because that's what's important to me. You know, I don't care who knows whether I designed it or anything. If they like it, if they embrace it, that's what the whole thing's about.